All right, guys, we'll go ahead and jump in and go over these. Please let me know what questions you have as usual. So 45 is C. 46 is A. 47, B as in boy. And 48, D as in dog. Questions that you guys have about those first four, please let me know. Speak up if you do. We're missing a lot of folks today. Some people who would ask questions. So if you have one, make sure you let it be known. All right, and we will go ahead and move on. Feel free to put it in the chat if you have one. All right, 49 is C, and 50 also C. All right, questions about either of those? Okay, and 51 is B as in boy. 52 is A. And 53, B as in boy. Mark those down. Let me know which questions you have. So this will be period 9 stuff mixed in with a little period 8. All right. And last two, so totally period 9, A, and 55 is B as in boy. Questions about either of those? All right, guys. So again, my guess is that on the exam on Thursday, you probably won't even have this many period 9 questions. This was 5, but who knows? I've seen College Board make promises before that they go back on. So we'll see. But hopefully, like these questions, I think are not too hard. So if you got questions like that, hopefully they'd feel pretty doable. All right, guys, let's go ahead and just go over a couple things of what's coming up, and then we will jump in for the day. And let me check really quick. I think I have a private message. I want to make sure it's not from one of you guys. All right, we're good. So today, again, AP Calc exam, so that's why I'm recording our class. Obviously, we're missing some folks, but as a reminder, there are these 2 optional review guides that you guys can complete, periods 1 through 5 and periods 6 through 9, that if you turn them in by tomorrow at 10 o'clock p.m., then you guys can get some extra credit for those. If I were to focus on one of them personally, I would probably do the periods 1 through 5, just because that's the stuff that it's been the longest time since we've talked about it. But truthfully, again, we're preparing for this exam for Thursday. We don't have tutoring tomorrow as far as like overall tutoring because of junior day. And so as a result of that, you guys should have plenty of time that you could knock both of these out. And again, it helps you in multiple ways. It helps you guys get extra credit, also helps you guys review. So why not? And then as a reminder, of course, our exam is on Thursday, and then we are done. I'm going to do everything I can to get grades up, help you guys out in these last few weeks. We're going to have sort of a short little mini, easy project that's going to be fully in class, no homework, that you guys can hopefully get a good summative grade on, and we'll watch a movie, something like that as well. And as just so you guys know too, like I'm not assigning any homework or anything that you would have to do at home for the rest of the year either. So you're almost done with homework in this class if you get these 2 review guides done. Let me see. And then I will have a review session tomorrow at some point. I got to figure out what time is going to work best for me. Sorry if it doesn't work for you, but I'll send out an email about that and I'll put it in the chat as well. So just, feel free to tune in tomorrow if you guys want to show up to that. All right, so it says tomorrow's exam. It should say Thursday's exam. This is just a breakdown. Nothing should be new here because it's very similar to the practice test that we just took. But I just want to show you guys a few key things here. Let me pull out the pen so I can write a little bit. And sorry for the bad handwriting in advance. So guys, multiple choice on our practice exam, we had 49 questions. On this one, you'll have 55. You'll do that in 55 minutes. Okay. And then all of the writing, again, I want to just reiterate this, all combined is 60% of your score. So again, writing counts as more than multiple choice. So it is okay if you are not a good multiple choice test taker. In fact, a lot of you guys saw that you got less than half of the questions correct and you still managed to pass, or you're close to passing. So this is where we really want to leverage writing. Some things that'll look a little different. Short answer on Thursday, you're going to have 3 that you'll answer, but you guys can see here, you're going to have 4 options, which will be nice. Okay, so this is how it'll work, is you'll have 1 required question that's in between periods 3 and 8, and you'll have a second required question that's between periods 3 and 8, again, those being the most important periods essentially, and then you'll choose a third question that would either be from periods 1 through 5 or periods 6 through 9. So that one, that's the nice thing. You get to say, okay, I like this question, I don't like this one, and so I choose the one that I want. Guys, I will say, and I'll reiterate this later, short answer, I think, is your best bet of getting a lot of points on this test. So I think, some of y'all maybe on the practice exam didn't take short answer as seriously because you're like, well, it's just short answer. But guys, it's worth 20% of the grade. Theoretically, they're the easiest to write because there's no rubric. You're just answering questions. And so if you take those seriously and do your best with that, that really gives you a lot of leverage on your score. Okay. In my opinion, that's really the difference for students of being able to pass or not pass the exam. So a lot of you who got 1s and 2s, you could have gotten a 3. It's just that your short answer scores were really low, right? If you look back at your rubric, a lot of you guys who got 1s and 2s, you got maybe, a 1 on one of the short answers and then like a 0 on the other 2 short answers. So really leveraging those and doing the best you can to get 3s on all of them is your best bet. Again, DBQ and LAQ, those will all go together. You'll have hour and 40 minutes essentially total. And that would include that 15-minute reading period. Remember, you can start planning and writing during that time, but I would recommend using it to, write your DBQ. Guys, you'll see here a common theme, periods 3 through 8. Periods 3 through 8, 3 through 8. Those are the key periods. So again, if I'm going to focus in on anything, I'm probably going to start over the next few days looking at, period 3 first, 4, 5, etc. 8 is what we've covered most recently, so just trust your intuition, trust that you remember that stuff. So start, in other words, don't spend a lot of time on periods 1 and 2. And then a long essay, it says spend 40 minutes. If you guys will remember, my suggested time was 35 minutes. It's just not worth as many points. That being said, don't blow it off, but theoretically it's worth the least. So spend most of your time on the DBQ. And again, on this, the nice thing is you're gonna have 3 options and you'll choose which option you like out of those 3. As a reminder, all of the prompts are gonna be worded pretty much the same. They're just gonna be on a different time period and a different topic. Questions that you guys have about the exam as a whole? At this point, I probably sound like a broken record, and hopefully, especially after taking a practice exam, nobody goes into this like not knowing what to expect. All right, so guys, today's gonna be a lot of me kind of talking through things. If we have time at the end, I will let you guys get to work. Since today is a fully online day, people who want to just at the end, if we have time, I'll let you log out and work if you want, and others can stay and ask questions. But again, I don't know if we'll get there. So don't forget, as far as Thursday, so number 2, pencils, they will have some provided, but bring your own. You guys cannot use highlighters, sorry. Bring blue or black pens. Guys, don't bring like sparkly pen or gel pens. I don't even know if those are still a thing, but I know they were when I was in high school. But, those are hard to read. Make sure you guys get good sleep Wednesday night. Don't, at this point, especially after taking the practice exam, we've done all these reviews. Hopefully by then you'll have turned in those extra credits. Remember, I'm not accepting the extra credits late. So don't stay up late. Just get a good night of sleep. Tutoring tomorrow if you guys feel you need it. A couple tips. Remember, 1 minute per question on multiple choice. If you guys have a watch or something, try to time yourself. For the most part, you should be able to move a little quicker than 1 minute per question, but I know some of them can kind of stump you. Guys, as a suggestion there, skip ones you don't know and come back to them, right? I'd rather you get and not have to rush through questions that you could get right just because you're sitting there like staring at a question that you don't know, right? Skip it, come back to it. For short answers, and I'm going to go over some of these other tips here. Remember to underline vocab, same thing with DBQ. Remember, guys, DBQ is worth more points, so finish that before the LEQ. Shoot to try to use at least 6 documents. That being said, and I'll talk about the rubric here in a second, 4 documents is also okay. In fact, 6 is kind of like the stretch amount, but I know some of you guys can't do that, so at least 4. Again, organize your essay by historical thinking skills, so cause and effect, whatever. Underline thesis, vocab, cite your documents. Guys, this is a big one I would say, is when you use a document, really try to put it in parentheses, like document A, document 1, whatever, once you've used the document, because that also helps your grader as they're going through it. They can go back and count your docs a little bit more easily and be able to get you the appropriate points. So that actually does make a huge difference. And lastly, I said this to you guys who are in the testing room with me on the practice exam, but for the LEQ, if you don't have time for it and you're in your last 5 minutes, at least write a thesis, right? Because then you can at least guarantee or hopefully guarantee yourself 1 point out of the 6. Just included this again, this big tips on dates. I'm not going to go over these, but again, if I was to try to commit any dates to memory, I would try to commit some of these or date ranges because that can help you kind of key in on possible topics and that sort of thing. All right, any questions on any of that? It looks like we got something in the chat here. Let me check. I don't know where you guys will be testing. I don't think it's the cafeteria because other students will be in the building, like freshmen and sophomores. So I think they'll send you guys to the appropriate room. My guess is you guys are probably in, you're either in pod C or you're upstairs. Actually, you might be upstairs because PA doesn't have any classes upstairs. So anyway, they'll send you to the right spot on Thursday. And so you guys know too, I'm actually not allowed to see you guys on exam day because I've not seen the test, but there's some sort of thing that the teacher can't see you. So like I won't even be able to come in and like answer questions in the morning or anything like that. I will not be in the building because I'll just be not there. So anyway, you won't be seeing me on Thursday. All right, guys. So a couple other things here. So you can click on this if you feel inclined. I'm not going to go through this with you, but it just is an overall overview of APUSH that the College Board created. If you have like outstanding questions or things you're curious about, feel free to read, but that's kind of a wink there. I don't imagine that any of you guys will do that, but wanted to throw it in there. So you guys can see I have some exemplar responses over here in the insets. You should see where it says DBQ exemplars and LEQ or SAQ exemplars. So I'm just going to tell you about them. I'm not going to walk through them at this particular point. So I have 2 particular DBQs that these are not from this group of students. These are ones that I've had in the past. Not that, you know, you guys wrote great DBQs, but I just already had these scanned and ready to go. So feel free, both of these students got 7 out of 7. They're both really good responses. Check them out. And yeah, so there's that. And then you guys can see LEQ exemplars as well. I have 1 exemplar of each of the LEQs. So one of the LEQs was on the 7 Years' War, and the other one was on the Mexican-American War. So you can read each of those to see what a good response looked like. And actually this first thing that you guys have here, the one on the top, that has actually sample SAQ, DBQ, and LEQ. The student got full points for everything. So if you wanted to just look over responses that overall did really well, check that out. So I am going to do a quick review of like everything you need to know SAQ, DBQ, LEQ wise with a PowerPoint. You guys are welcome to you can jot down notes or just listen. I can send you guys the PowerPoint when this is done because it's just a file. Well, I will do that. So just pay attention and let me know what questions you guys have. And again, whenever we're done with that is when we're essentially done with me talking and you guys potentially having time. So let me pull up that PowerPoint. This is not a Pear Deck. It's just a regular old PowerPoint. And I know, especially when you guys are at home, it's really easy to tune out what your teacher is saying. I know the temptation is real to do that right now. But especially when they're just talking about rubrics and things like that, I would highly, highly recommend that you guys pay attention right now, though. And one thing I will say is, there are a couple of you guys that asked me some questions that kind of startled me on the on the practice exam day. And I'm like, dude, we talked about this like many, many times. So this is once again one of those things. Just pay attention and you won't have those questions about like how to write the essay and stuff like that. So some short answer suggestions. And again, I know some of this is like a broken record, but just reiterating. Writing complete sentences, underline vocab to make it stand out, explain vocab. That can also really help. Some of you guys, I would say short answers were good, but they were just missing the detail that we're looking for. And that detail can really be the difference maker. Write legibly. I know that was our first time for a lot of you having to write in a long time because you've just been able to type all year since we've been on computers. But some of y'all's were very hard to read, and I like tried my best to do it, and because but these College Board graders, they don't know you, and if your thing is not legible, they're grading like a couple hundred of these things over the course of a week. They're just gonna put yours aside if they can't read it. So do your best to be legible. Answer in that ABC format. I'll talk more about that in a second. And guys, again, this is where you can most easily get points on the exam. So don't, again, the name short answer, I think some students tend to be like, well, it's just a short answer, so I'm not going to worry about it. But remember, it's 20%. It's worth a lot. You can really make the difference on your score with these. Cursive is okay, and Titus, your handwriting was great, so I had no trouble reading that one. So yes, if you guys write in cursive, some of you guys write kind of like me though, and it's really scratchy, hard to read. And like, I'm not making fun because my handwriting's bad, but do your best. I think the worst combination that I see is when a student doesn't write dark, like you don't press hard, and you write in like scratchy handwriting, because then it's like you're straining to see it, and it's not good handwriting. So at least do one or the other. Like try to write dark if you can, or make sure you have a good pen, like that kind of thing. So I'm going to talk about the short answers that were on the final. So this first short answer had, again, all of them look like this, 3 parts. Briefly explain one similarity between the colonies and the Chesapeake in New England, and then a difference. And then part C, what is a factor that accounts for that difference? Remember, before you start writing, always read all 3 parts, because some of you guys answered part C with B, and then in part C, you're like, oh, I just have to rewrite what I just said because I've already answered it. So read all 3 parts so that you don't have to repeat yourself. So this is we're going to look at 3 student exemplars here. You guys can see, first of all, just a couple notes, right? They wrote A, B, C format, which is good. Look at this. All of this stuff they've underlined, like just alone, just without reading the response, I can see they used a ton of vocab, and they underlined it all. It's easy to read. This, even without reading it, I can tell is probably going to be a good response. So part A, Chesapeake and New England were founded for religious tolerance. And then they didn't just stop there. Some of you guys, you're writing a little bit too short of answers, right? Then they explain it. Between 1607 and 1754, colonists migrated to escape the Anglican Church, Puritans seeking Quakers, etc. Part B. So this one I want you guys to know, actually, as far as how I taught it to you guys, is actually incorrect now. But back then, this was considered a correct response. This is a couple of years ago. So British colonies in the Chesapeake region had an economy developed on staple crops. Guys, the correct answer that a lot of you would have said would have been cash crops like tobacco. And then the New England region had an economy based on manufacturing and commerce, etc. Part C, as mentioned, the terrain of these regions were very different. Chesapeake region was warm, fertile, allowing for agriculture. New England, strong winters, and they really explain it. So point is, they answer all three pretty clearly, use lots of vocab. It's not too long, succinct, it's good. Questions about the first short answer? And guys, on a typical year, I would let you look back at your questions, but obviously I'm not going to scan every single one of your responses. That would take me literally days. So sorry. The second question. So a lot of you guys were surprised with yourselves that you actually did well on this. And this goes to show, like, we didn't talk really at all about environmentalism in this class. But the simple fact that you've done your review guides, the simple fact that many of you can read, all of you can read, you were able to piece these together. And actually, students did pretty decently on this second question. So you have two passages you're comparing. One thing to an implication just means like, what is he saying? Okay. So what is the first guy saying? What is the second guy saying? And then part C, what is something that happened in history that's consistent with either of their views? So lots of answers you could say. So we see, again, A, B, C, nice and detailed, lots of vocab. So John Muir, he is basically saying that we should protect the lands from destruction by large corporations. It should be free from human use. One thing that I caught a couple of you guys said is you really, I don't know where this came from, but a couple of y'all were thinking that what he meant was that we should use landscapes, that we should not keep them wild. And that's actually the exact opposite of what he's saying. He wants to preserve the land from human use. Part B, Theodore Roosevelt recognized the right and duty of this generation to develop and use the resources. And so he wanted to, however, make sure that they were not, that they're not overusing. You can see here that he would have wanted to protect the lands. So part C, the student talks about during the Gilded Age, the government gave subsidies to railroad companies, This would be consistent with Roosevelt's view that, yes, we're using the land, but we're also regulating the land. Many of you guys for part C talked about national parks, which was perfect. National parks was like the ideal answer there. All right, last, or did anybody have questions about that one? All right, make sure you guys are staying with me here. I know this is boring, but the last one we have John Adams. He's saying something about the revolution, and then this guy Benjamin Rush saying something about the revolution. So we're comparing the two passages, and then we say a specific thing that would have supported the first passage and a specific thing that would support the second passage. So this one, many of you guys did pretty well on. I was pretty pleased here. So John Adams, basically, the first guy views that independence, the real independence movement was all the stuff essentially before the Declaration of Independence. So it's like all of the Stamp Act, all of these other things that are happening that leads to independence. So that was the real revolution. Rush is saying that the real revolution was actually after the war was over, and it was this idea of trying to establish a revolutionary new government, right? That we had this government that was unlike any. So part B would just be like I just said, the American Revolution was sparked by a want to go back to salutary neglect, Declaration of Independence, Olive Branch Petition, Part C, after the war, American colonists debated the ratification of the Constitution, anti-federalists, federalists, etc. So again, two good connections. Overall, you guys did pretty well on that one. So questions about the third short answer? Okay. Before I talk about DBQ, if you guys want to just take a 30-second just stretch break, because I know this stuff is not the most exciting, take a quick stretch break, then we'll come back together. All right, back to it. So the DBQ prompt, evaluate the extent of change in continuity in the lives of African Americans in the South, 1865 to 1905. So again, when I'm reading my prompts, I should look for the historical thinking skill. Sometimes it's not as obvious, and this one is pretty obvious. It says change in continuity. And then our subject, African Americans, and then our time period 1865 to 1905. So again, this is where knowing some dates really helps, because 1865 is telling us this is after the Civil War. So how did the lives of African Americans change after the Civil War up to this 1905 date? So thesis, a couple reminders. Remember, thesis must acknowledge all parts of the question. In this case, it needs to acknowledge continuity and change. One thing that I'm still noticing about some theses, right? Don't overthink the thesis. Some of you guys are still not doing the basic thing though. And probably most often students who didn't get the thesis point is that you are doing this. Rather than merely restating or rephrasing the prompt. So if you just restated this prompt, and you just said the lives of African Americans had some changes and some continuities between 1865 and 1905, that is not enough. At least tell us about a change, right? African Americans were free after the Civil War, free from slavery, but experienced racism and other things, right? So like at least be a little bit specific so you're not just restating the exact prompt. I want to show you guys again what a intro paragraph could look like and what a good thesis looked like. So the intro here, it doesn't give a ton of information. Like don't spend 15 minutes of your time writing an intro. They're just giving a very basic intro about what happened in this time period. 1865 marks the end of the Civil War, from the Civil War, etc. So here's our thesis. From 1865 to 1901, while the lives of African Americans altered in representation during Reconstruction, this change was quickly reversed in the South when met with resistance and violence, returning the hierarchy where it stood before. So they're addressing both change and continuity. This one's a pretty advanced thesis. You wouldn't even have to give this much to get the point. But notice they underlined it. It addresses all parts, and it tells me what they're going to talk about. Again, don't write a thesis until you've read the documents, though, right? Because the documents will help you key into what the continuity and change is. And I want to remind you guys that it is possible you're going to get, like, this is a good prompt that I gave you guys very purposefully. It is very possible that you're going to get a prompt that you're a little bit more unfamiliar with on Thursday. And if that's the case, read the documents, just trust your ability to understand and annotate, and you can then base the essay off of that, right? Like that's the whole point of the DBQ, is that theoretically you could be given a prompt in documents that you're unsure of, and then once you've read them, you can piece together an essay. That's the whole point. Okay. Questions about thesis? All right, a couple other things. Documents. Guys, you'll get 1 point if you use at least 3 out of the 7 documents. And that means even if you're not doing like adequate quote sandwiches. So in the least, at least use 3 documents. This is where I really want everybody to shoot for, is using 4 documents, but not just 4, doing quote sandwiches for those 4. And remember, technically, according to the rubric, you only need to do one of the IPP, intended audience, purpose, or point of view. However, keep in mind that if you did that one single thing incorrectly, that could jeopardize your ability to get credit for that document. So it doesn't hurt to do all parts, or at least two parts of IPP, intended audience, purpose, or point of view, because then you can guarantee that you're getting credit for that particular document. So trying to shoot for 4, and then those of you guys who really want to go all in, and if you can, try to use 6 documents. You can get 3 points. And so I want to be, this is kind of confusing, but what that essentially means is that you do 4 quote sandwiches, and then 2 documents could just be like referenced. So that doesn't mean they have to be 6 quote sandwiches when you're thinking about your timing. Okay. Any questions there? So again, I would, if I were you, shoot for 4 to 6. One thing that is worth noting though, there's no points for just doing 5 documents, right? So I would not waste my time writing a 5th document. And if I was running out of time, I would just do 4. And then that way I would spend more time on the LEQ. Okay, so if you're thinking about how you're biding your time. Outside examples. So this is SFI that is not found within the document. So for example, document 2 is about black codes. So that's great if you mentioned black codes in your essay. However, that doesn't count as an SFI point, right? So if it's mentioned in the document, it doesn't count. So you have to use outside examples outside SFI. So other things, Plessy versus Ferguson, Jim Crow laws, Hayes-Tilden compromise, etc. There's a lot of other things you could talk about. Contextualization is just connecting all of this stuff together into a broad argument. Again, I want to remind you guys, this point is basically after we've read the entire DBQ, your entire essay. Is it clear that you understand the time period in question? So again, you mention, say, a vocab term, Plessy versus Ferguson. Well, expand on that, explain it, right? Don't just name drop stuff, and that's going to help you get to this point. So that's kind of a good rule of thumb, is just to make sure you're actually explaining vocab that you use. Basically, well-rounded understanding of the history. Okay, historical thinking skill. Keep in mind there are 3 of them: comparison, continuity and change, and causation. It will hopefully very clearly be one of those 3 skills. In this case, it was what is the same and what is different across the time period. But again, that's how you want to structure your essay. And I was really happy with how students did this. I would say 90% of you, that's how you structured your essay, is you talked about the documents that were the continuity documents, about how things stayed the same for African Americans. And then you talked about in another paragraph, the change documents, what was different. And that was really nice. That's what you should do. And so again, structure your essay with, the ideal essay you guys get is a causation one, right? Cause and effect would be the easiest essay to write. But really, any of these should be pretty manageable after you've read your documents. Don't need to look at that. So there is another way to get that final point that I'm just going to reiterate. So again, make sure you structure your essay that way, but you can also do a couple other things to potentially guarantee you get a point. So extending the argument beyond what is asked in a way that makes sense. That's kind of a confusing thing, but here's an example. So the essays about the Reconstruction in the South, you could connect this to other things in history that are not in the documents, like say the Great Migration, and that there's a lack of opportunities until the 1960s, etc. It's something that you kind of do throughout the essay. That's pretty tough to do. You can also do a counter argument is a way to get that last point. So if you want to include, like if you do have time to do a conclusion, to write a counter argument, I have this little note here: be careful not to go too far because you don't want to disprove your entire paper. And then lastly, connecting to another time period, right? So this is called synthesis. Essentially, again, you're showing how multiple things are similar across history, even if it's not in the documents itself. Questions about those? And really, this little slide that I just went through, I wouldn't think too much about that because you can still, again, if you organize your essay appropriately, cause and effect, whatever historical thinking skill it is, then you'll be fine. Okay, so some general suggestions for the DBQ: use outside information throughout your essay. Okay, a lot of you guys just went straight into talking about the document without explaining the time period or what's going on, right? I know it's a rush, you have limited time, but try to use outside information throughout the essay. Use the words, right? Be specific, like say, the purpose is, the intended audience is. That does go a long way because you're helping the grader see that you're addressing that IPP. Lead into your quotes or paraphrases, so don't just start a quote at the beginning of a sentence, lead into it. So, according to document A, according to Thaddeus Stevens. Guys, this one is a big key. A couple of you did this. Do not just go through the documents in order. That is not how the essay is meant to be written, and it will probably cause you to not get any points on this section. So if you just say like, you know, in your essay, you're like document 1, document 2, document 3, because the whole point is one of the skills that you're using is that you're able to read these documents and organize them in a way that makes sense. So do not just go through them in order. And then quote sandwich as a reminder, give background information for the document, whatever is appropriate. Use your quote and then IPP. Try to do all 3 parts if you can, or at least 2, so that you can guarantee you get the point. All right, any last questions about DBQ before I talk about LEQ? All right. So LEQ, same as DBQ with the thesis, address all parts of the prompt. So in this case, the prompt, you had 2 different ones you could choose from. One was a question about the Mexican-American War, and one was about the 7 Years' War. LEQ, support for the argument. So this is just about using SFI, right? The LEQ isn't really, there are no documents for the long essay. So you're just trying to connect as much information as you know. So you get 1 point for using at least 3 SFI or vocab terms. You get 2 points for using at least 6. Guys, this is, in my opinion, a pretty straightforward way to get your points, right? If you can pull together enough information about the topic at hand, using at least 6 vocab terms, that's going to give you a big advantage. So all of those review sheets that you guys have SFI and vocab for each, that are like the key terms for each period. Study those, look over those. That is really good stuff for you to know. Historical thinking skill, exact same as for the DBQ. Again, organize your essay in this way: continuity and change, cause and effect, comparing 2 different time periods, etc. General suggestions for the LEQ. So be thorough. Here's this seems pretty obvious, but generally a more in-depth essay, as long as it's historically accurate, will receive a higher score. So if you write the LEQ and it only has like 3 sentences, it's probably not going to get as many points as somebody who wrote a couple paragraphs and really went into depth. And again, I know that's hard. You guys are not historians, but that's where the studying comes into play. Use and explain and connect your SFI in a way that's coherent, right? So in this case, you don't have documents, but you're going to drop in all this different vocab and stuff like that. You want to make it coherent. Explain the synthesis part. So again, if you connect an outside example or something like that, just make sure you don't get off topic. So again, same thing as with the DBQ. You can actually do that where, again, you're talking about the Mexican-American War. You could somehow connect it to, I don't know, Vietnam, right? And whatever, about expansion of or imperialism and how the United States is expanding. So the point is you can make those connections, and that can help you as well. Again, if you run out of time, at least write a thesis. I know this was our first time doing a DBQ and LEQ together, so a lot of you guys did run out of time. And again, I don't want you to disregard the LEQ because it does still count as 15%. Finish the DBQ first, but ideally you do write more than a thesis. I want you guys to try this. And again, anything you can do to maximize points is ideal. All right, so that is all of my what I wanted to go through there. Any overarching questions that you guys have for me today? We got about 3 minutes left. So I'm just going to show you a couple last things, and then I'll let you guys probably go a little bit early here. So in the 9.5 packet, you guys can see I have period 1 through 3, period 4 through 6, period 7 through 9 overviews. If you've showed up to any of my tutorings, this is what I've already gone through, but it's a kind of nice, short and sweet explanation of each period. And it also tells you why the time periods have the specific dates attached to them. So like here we see period 1, 1491 to 1607. It tells you what happened in 1491 and what happened in 1607, and then some of the stuff that falls in there. And so it's just a nice short like overview of some of that stuff. And so yeah. And then another thing I'll point out, guys, up on this 9.1 packet that says overview and review day. Just want to remind you guys, this is the same thing I was just talking about, that at the bottom of that packet, I took from each of those review sheets the like key terms and key vocab, and I've just put it all in one place. Again, I highly recommend looking through those and trying to remember some of that stuff. That will help you on all aspects of the exam, even multiple choice questions. If you don't remember what mercantilism is, but you at least took a minute to review these, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, it's that economic policy. And then on a multiple choice question, you see the word mercantilism. Well, voila, you're going to know what that term means, hopefully. So again, this is not the type of test, and neither is AP Bio, neither is, a lot of these AP exams. This is what the college experience is we're no longer, taking elementary level classes. You guys have to look over and study this stuff. So you've done your review guides, but it's not over. Take a few more days. We don't have any more homework after all this stuff is done. Thursday is our day, and then after that you are free. So study now, prepare. Even if you got a 1 or a 2, you can still pass this exam. So with that, guys, we're at 10:30. Hope you all have an amazing day. I will send out a note about when we'll host a review session tomorrow. Please make sure you let your advisor know if you're planning on going to the junior day. We're just trying to know how many students will be there tomorrow. Have a good one, guys.